Good evening, this is Quintus Curtius. Welcome back to the podcast. And in this podcast, we're going to do more movie reviews. My last podcast was movie reviews, and that format seemed to go over well with listeners, so we'll try that again and do some movie reviews here. I also intend to post trailers for each of these three movies that I'll talk about, and I'll do that on my website when I post the actual post for this podcast, so you can see those trailers there. Sometimes it's nice just to see a trailer, even if you've already heard a little bit about the movie. You already kind of know what to expect. You already have a general idea of what it's about. It's nice to see a trailer because you can experience the film a little bit more visually than just through hearing. The three movies that we're going to talk about are Good People from 2014, Smoke and Mirrors, a Spanish movie from 2016, and the very, very impressive The Killing of a Sacred Deer, a film that's out now in theaters. Very, very effective psychological horror film. And we'll save that one for last. Because that one is going to take a little bit more time than the others to go through. So let's start out here with Good People. This is a film that came out in 2014 and directed by Henrik Ruben Genz, G-E-N-Z, and it stars Kate Hudson, James Franco, and the great actor Tom Wilkinson. In this movie, let's first start out by saying this movie is nothing special. It's nothing earth-shattering. It's nothing that's ever going to rock the world of artistry. But it's a good movie. It's a good little movie, well worth the entertaining time that you spend in watching it. And it deals with a premise that we often see in noir films. It's the theme of the innocent couple who stumble upon ill-gotten gains of others, and what bad things happen to them after that. They stumble upon a stash of money that are the proceeds of criminal activity, and where things go from there. The movie starts out with this American couple living in London. The backstory to that is the male lead, played by James Franco, I guess had some sort of problems back in the States, and to get away. Oh, actually, the wife, played by Kate Hudson, had a miscarriage, I guess, back in the States, and so they move to London to try to fix up James Franco's mother's house. That's the premise here. But the movie opens with a very violent robbery. Some London gangsters rob a nightclub, and things don't go very well, and violence comes out of it. And what ends up happening out of that is the money taken from the robbery finds its way into the apartment of one of the perpetrators, and this is a guy who's a tenant of Kate Hudson and James Franco. And this guy dies, and they have to clear him out of the apartment. The two of them, the couple, clears him and his things out of the apartment, and when they do that, when they are in the process of doing that, they come upon this stash of cash. And of course, this then presents them with the classic moral conundrum. What do you do? Do you turn in the money? Do you Do you call the police, or do you try to keep a little bit of it for yourself, or do you try to keep all of it for yourself? Do you try to lie low, see if the heat will blow over, and then see if you can spend the banknotes, and to see if you're home free? So this is the moral conundrum. And as you would expect just like in every noir film, the best of intentions of the protagonists always ends up producing bad results. And this is a very, very good example of that. So it's a very good movie. Again, there's nothing really earth-shattering here. It's a taut little noir crime drama. But, I'm at the point now with movies where even if a movie is not that great, even if it's not anything to write home about, it doesn't really matter to me, because sometimes it's nice just to watch a movie, just to see some nice faces, to see some nice acting, some good acting, to see some interesting scenes, some nice scenery. I mean, sometimes it's nice, especially when movies are set in Europe. It's nice just to see the city. And I know that sounds, I don't know, maybe like seeing movies for the wrong reason, but I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to deny that sometimes I'll see a movie that's set in Paris just because I like to see Paris. I like to see the streets. I like to see the monuments. I like to see the landmarks. And same thing with London. I've been to London a few times. It's nice to see cars drive around London. It's nice to see them hit the major monuments and say, I remember that. I remember when I was there. It's very nice, very nice. Yeah, same thing in New York City. It's nice to see movies set in places that you've been at sometimes. So, nothing really Academy Award winning here, but that's okay. This movie is still worth seeing. It's still worth it. And it delivers, it does everything that it sets out to do. It delivers on its promises. So, you might want to check that out. All right. The next movie we're going to talk about is a Spanish film. And its title in its English release, or its release in the English-speaking world, was Smoke and Mirrors. Smoke and Mirrors, and it's from 2016. The original title was The Man of 1,000 Faces, and in Spanish apparently it's El Hombre de las Mil Caras. El Hombre de las Mil Caras. And this movie was directed by the director Alberto Rodriguez. And it stars Jose Coronado and Eduard Fernandez. And this movie is one of those might-have-beens. It's one of those great might-have-beens. And what I mean by that is it probably sounded like a promising project when it was being first written or explored or story paneled out, but it just doesn't come together. It falls very, very flat. And you're left with the feeling of, what the hell did I just watch here? What was this movie all about? Now, apparently this movie is supposed to be based on some sort of true story on some guy who fooled an entire country, some guy who was some sort of intriguing imposter type character who scammed various different people and did this and did that. But, that may all be true, but at the end of the day, you've got to have a compelling storyline. You can't just rely on just a lot of headlines from the news. People want to see something more than that. Now, the basic plot here is supposed to be sort of this act of revenge by someone who used to work for the Spanish government, and how he kind of scams everybody. The basic plot is here. You've got a guy who is an ex-secret agent for the Spanish government, and he's framed by his government, and he has to leave, and everything goes to hell for him. And eventually, he receives he's visited by a powerful Spanish police commissioner who offers to give him some money to safeguard some money that he, as a police commissioner, embezzled when he was on the job. So that's the basic outlines here of the story. And I think the director wanted to make this movie sort of a clever kind of a sort of a Ocean's 11 story of international intrigue, where you had witty exchanges between various principals, and you had interesting international locations, and it just doesn't come off that way. What you really have at the end of the day is you've got a bunch of middle-aged to elderly Spanish guys passing around briefcases to each other full of money in hotel rooms, in restaurants, old guys exchanging envelopes, and I think that's a good analogy. Old guys exchanging envelopes and briefcases in various different settings in Spain and in different cities of Europe. And that, my friends, does not a movie make. You've got to have more than that. And I think that this project may have started out with the best of intentions, but it just doesn't gel. And you can see that there's some ambition here. You know, the director has a voiceover by the main character who tries to explain to us what he's doing. And then you've got these different intercutting of various scenes where money is being passed around. And the director presents all this stuff like it's supposed to be really important. We're supposed to really care about all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I just didn't care. I could not have cared less. And what's even worse is you've got no characters. You've got very little action. You've got no characters that you care about. There's no really women that have any role in this movie. Not that that's a necessity or anything, but there's nothing to kind of soften the effect of a bunch of guys chain smoking cigarettes and cigars and passing money around. It just looks pathetic, really, is what it looks like. And I'm sorry, but this is a movie that I'm not going to be able to recommend. See it if you must. If you really like this sort of thing, fine, but I have to say that this was a big disappointment. All right, and this next movie, though, is no disappointment. In fact, this is one of the best horror films I've seen in a long, long time. And this is none other than The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which is in theaters now, in select art house theaters now. The director here is Yorgos Lanthimos, a Greek director. And I'm going to try to explain the basic plot of this movie without revealing too much of the details, and then try to explain to you why I think it's so good. But this is a shattering and truly unnerving horror movie that feels like a nightmare that you're trapped in that you just can't get out of. And this is just a very, very impressive movie. This director made a very good movie some years back that I saw that really made an impression on me. And I knew this guy was capable of great things when I first saw his movie. He made a movie called Dogtooth, which was a very, very perverse and odd movie. If you get a chance, you should try to see that too. It's about a movie about the general premise here. It's a Greek family where the parents actually isolate their children from the entire world and bring them up in total isolation and ignorance of the entire world. And when I say isolation, I mean literal isolation. They are not allowed even to interact with the outside world in any way beyond what they can control. So they feed them all these stories about how there are, airplanes are actual flying dragons and cats are, poisonous toads, and it succeeds on many, many levels, on dramatic levels, and also on philosophical levels. But a very, very good movie, very disturbing film as well. So this guy, Yorgos Lanthimos, this guy must have a very, let's just say, a very expansive sense of what good plotting is. This guy has done his homework. He knows a lot about Greek literature and history, and this guy is able to bring those things to bear. But The Killing of a Sacred Deer, let's first talk about this title, this very odd title. And this movie, just so we can talk a little bit about the cast, stars Colin Farrell, Nicole Kidman. Yes, these actors are still around. They're still making movies, thank God. And even Alicia Silverstone, if you remember her from the 1990s, she's still around and she has a small part in this movie. And the title, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, is a reference to classical literature. And those of you who might know this reference, when Agamemnon was organizing his band of Argives, of Greeks, to go to Troy to make war against the Trojans, he was told by the gods that he had to sacrifice something in order to get the right winds that he desired. And they told him to sacrifice his daughter. And he was prepared to do that, but before he could do that, the gods transformed the daughter into a deer. So he killed, that's the killing of a sacred deer. So that's where the the literary origin of the title comes from. But this is one of those movies where it's all about the scenes and the acting. This is the general setup of the plot. The plot is we have a comfortable, a well-off, middle-aged cardiologist, played very well by Colin Farrell. And he has his upper middle-class wife, Nicole Kidman, their two children, a daughter and a son. And the movie starts out where you see this doctor befriending this young teenage boy in a very odd way. And no explanation is given at the beginning for this. We don't know really what the purpose or what the origin of all this is. So the director is able to play on our sense of unease right off the bat. So the director puts us on edge. He puts us off our balance. He sets us ill at ease about this whole thing, because you're watching this doctor meet this kid in cafeterias and cafes, and he's giving him gifts, and you were saying, hey, what the hell's going on here? You're thinking the worst. Let's face it, you're thinking the worst. Based on the headlines we see of the perversities that are out there, you immediately jump to the worst conclusions. Of course, what's great about this movie is it turns out to be even more demented than we could ever have imagined, but I'll get to that here in a minute. So he's befriending this kid, and it turns out that the cardiologist had a patient sometime previous who died on the operating table, and it turns out that the Colin Farrell character, the doctor, had a couple drinks before the operation. And so there's a question of whether he had any contributory negligence that contributed to this man's death on the operating table. All right, so that's the general setup. So I guess out of a sense of guilt and obligation, he somehow tries to make amends by befriending this kid and by bringing him into his family circle, about inviting him over the house for dinner, and somehow trying to get this kid some sort of stability in his life, because he's the son of a single mother. And all of this sounds so routine, but you just have to see the way these characters talk. Everyone in this movie talks like they have some sort of weird autistic impediment. Everyone is aspy. Everybody is weird. There's just something really off about all these characters. They're all strange. They're all very, very strange. Everyone in this movie is weird, but not in such an overt way that you can really put your finger on it. It's just a vague sense of unease. You're surrounded by a very, very vague sense of unease that gets worse and worse. And this is really the mark of a master of horror, because horror is one of the emotions that's the most difficult for a director or a writer to produce in an audience. It's difficult. It takes effort. You've got to go about it gradually. You've got to build it gradually, and you've got to build it by using familiar themes in unfamiliar ways. And that's what director Lanthimos does so well here. Does so well. I can't say enough good things about the directing of this movie. So eventually this is what happens. And I don't think I'm not revealing anything by telling you this, but what ends up happening is we find out that this kid is some sort of, I don't even know what you would call him, a witch doctor, or he has some sort of occult power. And apparently he puts the question to the doctor. He says, look, you were responsible for the death of one of my family members. So now, to even things out, one of your family members is going to have to die. But I'm not going to be the one to decide that. I'm not going to be the one to decide that. You're going to have to do that. You're going to have to kill one of your own family members. And this is what's going to happen. All your wife and your two kids are going to become paralyzed, and then they're going to start to bleed from the eyes, and then they're going to be dead. So, unless you execute one of your own family members, your whole family is going to die. And I can't tell you just how weird this is when this kid says this, because he says it in such a way that it's almost like, he's eating a sandwich or something, and he says, he just says all this in a very rapid way. And then he says something like, hey, can you pass the salt or something? So it's there's just a real insidious sense of evil that comes across. And that's all I'm going to say about the plot. It just goes down from there, or gets more and more involved from there. And this movie, man, like I said, it feels like a nightmare. It feels like a nightmare. And I was trying to look up the name of the actor who plays the kid, and I think his name is Barry Keoghan. It's spelled, the last name is spelled Keoghan. So I'm assuming it's Keegan. I'm not positive about that, but I think it is. And I don't know the origin of this actor. I don't know if he's American or British or Australian or whatever his nationality is. But this kid does a fantastic job, because he just exudes weirdness and a sinister aura in a way that really has to be seen to be believed. He's like a modern Damien from The Omen, but whereas kids in the 70s were not sort of maybe as autistic as they are now. It sounds horrible to say that, but maybe just the years and years of social media and Ritalin and the hormones in the water have just changed people. But this is a Damien for the new era, the new millennia. This kid is just really something else. So if you get a chance, try to see this movie. I was lucky enough to see it in a theater. I saw it just last weekend, and I would strongly recommend a must-see for fans of horror. For fans of horror, especially for good horror. This is the kind of movie that Stephen King would really appreciate. So that will wrap up the reviews here in this podcast. I will post the trailers of each of these movies on my site, so you can go to qcourteous.com and check that out and see those trailers. But so two good ones, one not so good one this week. And until next time, we will keep the fires burning. I'm Quintus Curtius. Good night.